Oh no. What? Hmm. Okay. Sorry, guys. Hi, I'm Elise. This is my literacy autobiography. I think that the first event that I should mention in my timeline is it's not so much an event, but I think it is important to mention my early years. My socioeconomic situation as a kid was not ideal for establishing good literacy or literary habits. I was never read to as a kid. We didn't really have books in the house. Um, my parents never read, and I'm sure their parents never read. So um, I'm sure we're all aware of the importance of exposing, especially really young kids, to literature and kind of establishing those habits. So yeah, I think that's important to mention. Also, okay, so early elementary. I do remember very vividly quite a few of the stories that were read aloud to us, and I remember enjoying them. Silverstein, in particular, The Whipping Boy was one of the only like actual like long chapter stories that I remember having been read to. Um, and Also in elementary school, I think it's important to mention this is where I was introduced to the concept of creative writing, um, encouraged to write short stories or poems, and I remember really enjoying it, and it's kind of sparked an interest in me, and it encouraged me to start journaling. This is when I started journaling. Middle school. I do recall many of the books that were assigned. However, I also know that they were not books that I were interested in at all. They're not books that I would have considered uh, that I've actually read. I can't tell you how I got through those lessons. I don't know how I completed the assignments that were associated with them. But just to name a few, The Giver, My Side of the Mountain, The Hatchet, Into the Wild, and Romeo and Juliet. Um, in middle school, I do remember progressing as a writer, not just creatively, also academically, writing research papers and whatnot. But still, obviously, I was struggling in terms of reading and reading comprehension, and I was not at all reading for any kind of interest of my own. It's definitely not at all how I was spending my free time. High school. Beowulf was a really defining moment for me in my life. I just struggled through that section of that English class hardcore. It was painful to me. I was absolutely disinterested in it from the very beginning, and I wasn't able to participate in any of the discussions. I was lost, and I feel like this is where I realized yeah, you don't have a shot in excelling in English. However, I mean, I was a really good writer. I really feel like even though I wasn't progressing as a reader, the writing aspect of my literacy was just, I feel like really skyrocketing. Um, I was journaling a lot, writing a lot of poems, and in high school is also when I decided I wanted to pursue a career in journalism. Again, still very uninterested in literature and not at all reading, even assigned readings or anything on my own. Yeah, in high school, I had just kind of accepted that, English wasn't for me. Reading wasn't something that I was good at. It wasn't something that I was capable at becoming good at. I had accepted that. And until I think I was like maybe 23 or 24, I had a boyfriend who was an avid reader, and he read a lot, and he liked to talk about what he was reading, and he challenged me to read Catcher in the Rye, which was his favorite story. his favorite book. And I read it. I did. I read it from cover to cover. I can't say that I comprehended it. I'm sure there were things that flew way over my head. And to this day, it's not a favorite of mine by any means, but it's a really important book to me simply because it was the first book that I ever did read on my own, front to back. And it was a really defining moment in me. It proved that I could do it. And ever since reading Catcher in the Rye, I've just read everything that has crossed my path, really. I acknowledge that I had a lot of catching up to do, and I was just constantly reading ever since. I really developed a huge passion for literature, and it all started with Catcher in the Rye. So college take two. I did go to Chico State right out of high school, and that ended in flames shortly after. But I went back to school at about 25 or 26, and obviously I had found literature and had come to find how uh, amazing it is, and it changed my life. And so I decided I wanted to major in English. And I had a lot of remarkable professors, but in particular, Professor Gossett was amazing. And he told me, and I have since told many people, read Jane Austen out loud and you'll be smarter for it. So I did. I read most of her works, short stories, and of course, her classic novels. And I feel like I am much smarter because of Jane Austen. Beowulf, the second time around in a college class, was markedly different. Very just it was really. I don't know. It was a really interesting. It was really interesting to experience Beowulf the second time around. Definitely not one of my favorite stories, obviously, but again, in terms of building confidence as a reader and um, you know, being able to partake in those discussions and comprehending the story and the messages and just the importance of that particular story. Um, it really did a lot of good for me in terms of, again, just building my confidence and helping me to believe in myself a little bit. And also in college, and I think this is really important. I know I'm going over here. Sorry, I hope that's okay. Um, I have had several instances where in college classes during discussions, I felt really belittled and discredited and, um, you know, embarrassed by others in the classroom with perhaps a more impressive literary history, more experience, and I can't tell you what it did for me in terms of, degressing. And there were several classes that I took where the students in the classroom really caused me to question whether or not I belonged there and whether or not I had made a mistake in choosing English as my major. So, although I really disliked those circumstances, I appreciated them because as an educator, I I recognize how detrimental those kinds of situations can be in the literary or the literacy, the development of my students, especially those who are new to literature or just now starting to find their relationship and their appreciation or their interest in it. So yeah, I feel like it's not a very happy event in my literacy timeline, but it's definitely a really important one to mention, and one that is definitely going to influence who I am as an educator and what kind of teacher I want to be, what kind of space I want to create for my students.